Hello, this is International Professional Communication with the focus this week on intercultural teams and negotiation. In this overview, I will also share a more local yet cross-cultural study, a story actually, of when two colleges were merged a bit over a decade ago at the University of Minnesota. This is the overview in the Canvas site for our course. You'll see that there are a number of resources, of course, the exercise, again, using the Google Cardboard device, and our ongoing discussion. You may recall this visual from a video a few weeks back, and I said, think of the communication style for messages to your target culture, or perhaps for your target culture. We can also think of this in terms of the work in intercultural teams and negotiation. Notice the different styles, whether you would, slowly work your way to a key point, or whether you would be incredibly direct with that. You may also recall this visual from a while ago, the different types of communication, whether direct and explicit or indirect and implicit again. Where does your target culture fall? Where do you fall in terms of your work on teams? What is your negotiation style? This week, we transition from that individual focus, primarily in the Varner and Beamer text, to a focus on teams. Varner and Beamer quote Daft and Lane, "A team is composed of two or more people who interact and coordinate their work to achieve a shared goal." One of the more concise definitions. To begin here, let's think about this. Just think of the best team you've ever been on. What were the qualities, characteristics? How would you describe it? And then in contrast, describe the worst one you've ever been on. Again, qualities, characteristics. I would guess both examples pretty quickly come to mind. You can think of them in terms of culture. What type of culture did each represent? A while ago, I did a study on 40 interinstitutional collaborative teams. This was quite an extensive study. And in beginning it, the interviews, with each group, I asked them the same question, describe the best, describe the experience. And about half of the people said, wonderful, exhilarating, win-win. It's the most enduring, intense experience I've had. It was visionary. It was synergistic. And about half of the respondents described the interinstitutional partnership in this case as way too political, centralized. I felt vulnerable, like I was being, exploited. It was way too complex, challenging. One person just simply said, grr. Okay, we know that there can be many different approaches to teams, and that the intercultural aspect adds yet just another layer. But in these particular interviews, again, about half approached it this way, or recalled it in this way, and about half this way. Even though what you would say same culture these were institutions across the U.S., it still has a very intercultural dimension, and many of the points made throughout this course and the things that we're considering apply not only with international professional communication, but in all of the work that we do. I do not include this particular resource on the site per se, but it is a great video. Takes about 4 or 5 minutes. I encourage you to access this and watch it. I include 2 URLs there. The one on the bottom is the one for this specific video. In a nutshell, it provides an overview, I say, of quite a bit of the points made in the Varner and Beamer text for Chapter 9 for this week. The URL here just includes a place where you can obviously do a search across all of the different videos and do a search, of course, on negotiation, intercultural negotiation. I would encourage those of you who are using this video, who are viewing it right now, to please talk about this particular video in the course forum. By doing so, I will know if you have viewed the video or not. So I please encourage you to view this a bit and talk about it in the course forum. It will give me an indication that you viewed the video and that you found this resource of some value. So let's look through the key points made by Varner and Beamer. Roles of team members. They have quite a number of lists again, and the distinctions between the roles of a member in an individualistic culture versus a collectivist one. Notice, at least I know in my training, you're schooled to think of ideas, to be a bit of a skeptic, because, you know, with that academic thinking of, well, have we really looked at everything or not? To be a finisher, an implementer, a negotiator, what is the special role that you bring to the team? Whereas in collectivist culture, also suggestion, consultant, implementer. Let's keep going. What type of negotiator are you? What outcomes are best? Win-win? Win-lose? Stalemate? I would guess that any number of you are aware of the many resources and studies of negotiation that show that anything other than a win-win will degenerate to a lose-lose. What most describes you? Are you a strategic negotiator? Are you a synergistic negotiator? And the phases of negotiation. Obviously, these phases are present in many other situations beyond negotiation, but development of the relationship, the exchange of information, persuasion, we would say the rhetoric of persuasion, and then what signals the concessions and the agreement. Again, Varner and Beamer highlighting the negotiation tactics that are different in low context as compared to high context cultures. Skim through these. Some similarities across both. Some differences. Do you avoid conflict, or are you silent? Do you insist on a final position or continue to remain open and flexible? As I mentioned earlier, there are many studies on this. I bring this one out, it's from the University of Aarhus in Denmark. I have a colleague there who is a former student in our PhD program. In this case, Smolinski studies the fundamentals of international negotiation. Okay, you could think of your culture as culture A, the person you're negotiating with as culture B. place the type of agreement you're looking to develop. You each come with strategies, with interests and priorities. And your strategies will indicate the type of interaction that you will follow. Your potential for an integrative agreement, largely influenced by your interests and priorities. Well, you may say, well, this is just very obvious. But it's also obvious that not enough people use something like this or refer to something like this as part of international or any type of negotiation. This research also points out each negotiation factor and the range of responses within it. So is your goal one of getting the contract done? Or is it one of working to develop a lasting relationship? Again, your attitude, win-lose or win-win. Your personal style, your communication, time sensitivity, and so on. Moving towards some of the pieces that we have listed to read and discuss this week, you'll see this article from the New York Times, What Google Learned from Its Quest to Build the Perfect Team. I'm not going to give an overview of this resource, but I encourage you to look at this, a few paragraphs here. It's a direct quote from this project. It was called Project Aristotle. And the researchers concluded that understanding and influencing group norms were the key to improving its teams. You know, what are the group norms? Not just how you respond, was it a good team or a bad team and why, but what were the norms that influenced that? So imagine you've been invited to join one of two groups. Team A is composed of people who are exceptionally smart and successful. You watch a video of this group working, you see professionals who wait until a topic arises in which they are an expert, and then they speak at length. This team is efficient, no idle chit-chat. It ends as schedule and disbands so everybody can get back to work. Team B is different. Evenly divided, successful execs and middle managers. Teammates jump in and out of discussions. People interject and complete one another's thoughts. When a team member abruptly changes the topic, the rest follows on the agenda, and by the end, the meeting doesn't really end. Everyone sits around to gossip and talk about their lives. Which group would you rather join? I encourage you to take some time with this article. I find it so interesting because for years I would always say at the end of a meeting, if people hung around and if you had trouble getting them out of the room or moving on to the next thing, it signaled a good meeting. It signaled healthy collaboration and a successful partnership. That was well before I came across this article and some of this research, and now I'm beginning to understand more about the type of team that, in my opinion, thrives. Another source, technical translation. This is to key into your ongoing work, obviously, with the University of Trieste and the Documentation for Translation project. And the person who actually located this resource was Liz Fendley, a graduate student in this course a year ago. The pages to key into for this week, please focus on the first chapter. You can read the whole thing or just focus on pages 1 to 18 and 44 to 45. But a quote from Byrne, The challenge for technical communicators is to ensure that all of the relevant information is indeed conveyed, but also that it's conveyed in such a way that the readers can use the information easily, properly, and effectively. This aim is precisely the same as that of technical writing. Now, Byrne discusses the challenge of translation as being the same as that of technical communication. What Liz Fendley says she likes to think of as getting out of the way of the user. When technical communication is done well, the information the user is working with has such a high level of accuracy and usability that the process that it took technical communicators and technical translators to create it is invisible. I also want to include here, as I mentioned earlier, just a bit about the high and low context cultures that exist locally as well. Now, you may be familiar with our College of Food, Agricultural, Natural Resource Sciences, but it came to be on July 1, 2006. At that time, as you can see from this visual, what were 6 colleges became 3. And you can see some different departments that moved from various colleges as well. Now, why I call this NewCo is that before the College of Food, Ag, Natural Resource Sciences, or CFANS, before it had that name, there was no name for this new entity, the one of these 3 that was being developed. And the dean of the college, his name was Chuck Muscaplat. I reported to him at the time. I was the senior associate dean in the College of Agriculture, Food, and Environmental Sciences at the time. Because there was no name for the developing new college, he called it NewCo. This is a visual of all the many committees that were in place at the time across the University of Minnesota as part of what was called the Strategic Positioning Task Force Implementation Structure. There were all of these boxes and things, as well as the mini groups and the resource alignment team. All total, I believe there were about 34 task forces at the time. There's a huge amount of work, but to bring the 2 colleges together, the College of Natural Resources and the College of Agricultural, Food, and Environmental Sciences, I created quite an extensive case study on the entire effort. If you are interested in reading that, please let me know. Just send a message. But I take this particular table from that analysis at the time. And I was struck by the different environments. The smaller College of Natural Resources functioned on a very informal environment, whereas it was called COAFs at the time, functioned in a much more formal. The CNR had a very focused mission. COAFs, a very diverse one. In terms of socialization, CNR, strong identification with the college itself. We're one large family. COAFs, there are many subcultures. In terms of information, again, more informal, less structure on the one hand, more formal structure on the other. And the strategy, very different again, reactive versus a bit more proactive. Leadership in CNR was more by personality. Leadership in COAFs was more by structure and delegation. So you can see in the case of these 2 colleges being merged, it's much more than putting the colleges together on a flowchart. It was very much about the merging of and work on intercultural teams. As the associate dean at the time, I worked with the other associate deans, and we put together many lunches and so many strategies for developing relationships. I could go back to all of these, and I could map the different negotiation contexts, to each collegiate unit. And I could certainly use all of this research in terms of how to work and understanding the range of responses. I simply share this particular case study because of the importance of recognizing intercultural teams and the different negotiation contexts and strategies, not only across different cultures and countries in international professional communication, but it may be next door, and you may be called upon to lead intercultural teams right where you are. Okay, the work due this week in the course forum, obviously respond to your discussion leaders, discuss these resources, the video I mentioned earlier. You also have the third Google Cardboard device exercise. So I very much look forward to your comment, input, and direction on that. For your documentation for translation project, you should have received comment regarding your first draft of your instructions, and you should begin developing your usability test. Have it ready to conduct and complete that test with your University of Trieste student, at least between March 27th and April 3rd, because you will need to share a draft of your usability test on April 5th. To then do the peer review by April 7th, and then quite a few final drafts are due April 10th. Thanks so much.